minimalism is not for us. I've always said this. That's ill. Maximalism feels more like us because the way we talk, our dressing, like every single thing. Nigerians are generally loud people.
What is really lacking in that space? Why are companies in the rest of the world, in the West, why are they finding it difficult to trust African-based creatives?
The mistake that we make on the African side is we have more people with the orientation of
how do creatives from Africa, how do they get to showcase their talent? Nigerian context, in Africa, we're just always struggling. Like everybody's just like, let me just eat. We need to outgrow that mentality, do work that is actually going to be impactful. What does a future exposed African creative community, what does it look like? What's the picture like? Have you ever imagined it?
First of all, you need to know that it's hard work. It's not easy. Sometimes it feels like needless labor. So you then have to find what success means for you.
Samuel and David on the call with us today on the session 2. It's another episode of the pod, and we're doing something we've never done before today. I'm really excited about this one, as much as I'm excited about other ones anyway, but also with the fact that these are like creatives doing similar work with us here. I think it's important to also hear their perspectives and also their own point of view on this thing, on this community building thing. And I think it will be fun. So we have David and we have Samuel. How are you guys doing today?
I'm good.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, super excited for this conversation.
Okay, yeah, same here. Really excited. I was going to say someone is wearing black and someone is wearing white. It almost looks like we have a bad cop, good cop already.
Funny how I had thrown on like a black t-shirt, but I figured that everybody would probably wear black, so I just put on like this jacket.
Wow, nice play.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see the way this conversation is shaping. Okay. Well, I'm not a black sheep, but I mean, maybe David is. But my first question was going to be like, who, like, both of you guys are like, I feel like you guys make a team, right? You guys make a brilliant team, obviously, having done what you're doing. And from my own experience with team building, it's always good to have like two people from like different aspects or different perspectives or different opinions and ways of approach, right? And I feel like maybe you guys have something to share in that regard, because I feel as though David is a bit different from how Samuel approaches things. So how did you guys even like come together to start the Huddle? Like, based on like your characters or like your backgrounds, like what was the point when you guys like came together and said, oh, we need to do this? Was it someone's idea first, or was it just two of you? Like, was it an eureka moment, or what was it like? Well, can you walk us through it?
So we always say like the Huddle, started as a simple phone conversation, right? So I was thinking through, what could we do, right? I mean, myself and David, we've had a lot of like prior conversations, about like the community, just generally, right? I mean, both of us like work remotely, so there was that lag between what was really happening, around us. I mean, I was very isolated because I was just always, working from home. It was very difficult to get a grasp of what the creative community was, and we're coming from the early days of dribble meetups where, Coca used to organize these dribble meetups, and, it was something I always used to look forward to, right? Because you could possibly meet your faves, and you could actually have like conversations. You were exposed to more things that you wouldn't casually find, because our community is not necessarily fully digital. Like you kind of like have to be in certain environments to actually get, certain informations, right, compared to other communities. So it started as a simple phone call between myself and David, right? And we're literally just talking through like, oh, what can we do? Like at that time, it was just simply let's just put something together. I mean, I think like the first Huddle, we planned it in like 2 weeks. We stumbled on the first venue. It wasn't even like, oh, we were actually like searching for venues. We went for, an event, and upon leaving the event, we saw that, oh, there's a new coffee shop here, right? We're like, oh, we can actually use this place for the huddle. So it started as a simple phone conversation where, and I think like for me, it was, I think the first thing would be who was the best person to call, in that moment, right? And just like what you said in terms of like our different paradigms, like, so for me, I'm very, very productive, like I'm kind of like very structured, and David is very highly creative, like, so when I had the conversation with David started bringing references that I've never stumbled on. I'm like, oh my God, like, yo, this thing you're saying, people have done this, check this out, check this out, check this out. I'm like, guy, is it that you had one archive sitting somewhere? I mean, David is like a go-to person to go to when you need inspiration. He has like sources from only God knows how much time he spends on those things. So it was literally like the best person to do this with, right? And it's kind of like really evident in how like the huddle has been running for a couple of years now.
Wow. I'm not surprised, but I'm surprised at how that happened, like how fast you shipped the idea. But David, how about you? Like when Samuel reached out to you, what were you thinking? What made you like move that fast?
Okay, so I've been, before we started having a conversation, I've been a huge fan of It's Nice That, and I like taking their content, It's Nice That, and Creative Mornings. So for the longest, I've always, before that time, I would come on Twitter sometimes. I would see conversations around the both design and the entire creative space. But one thing I found that most of the people that were actually doing very solid work were not talking about their work. And it felt like people are doing like even more incredible stuff than what I'm seeing here on Twitter. And these people actually need a platform for them to come and show their work, because maybe I like to think like me, because I would not randomly come on Twitter to tweet about my work. So where is that platform that I will come and showcase my work? Because I want to tell a story. I want to show my process. I don't want to just come and say, oh, this, then it transformed into this, and this is the result. Or show, I didn't even know how to show BTS and all those like snapshots. I like to tell the entire story. So I was like, oh, what's that platform that would be that safe space, that intimate space that people can come and share their process without any fear of being judged or fear of, or just regular fear that comes with showcasing your work. And that was it for me. I was like, okay, I'm game. Like, this is it. Because, and one thing that we found out over time is that most of the speakers that come on the audio, that was actually their first time showing their work in public. So it made sense.
That's interesting. And relatable at the same time, because obviously we're in the same industry and we understand these challenges. Like everything you said is game, like everything you said is 100. Especially like when it comes to creatives doing a lot of work and hardly talking about it or showing it, like telling stories about it, like you said, except maybe you see if you just posting the actual finished work on maybe like a Twitter or Instagram or something. So let's move quickly into like the premise or the purpose of like the huddle now. I think we've been able to establish your identities or about you guys, your background. Like I think David, you're a creative director, I believe, and Samuel is more of a product designer, product oriented person. So again, I'll just emphasize shortly on collaboration. So I really like the fact that you guys have those two differences, like two almost like extreme ends, where one is more strategy driven and then the other one is more creative driven, and that makes like a very good team. And it's all about like collaboration, and I think we spoke about this when we had our chat, that collaboration is something in the industry that I feel like we're yet to, like creatives are yet to hack, on a general level. I think in a micro level, if few people are doing like work together, like I see what Nia and Tiffy are doing, I think it's fantastic. Like the kind of work they're able to churn out because of the collaboration. I think it has taken even Nee's work to a different level, because obviously he doesn't have like illustration skills, and Tife doesn't have like creative direction and all that. But that's just an example. There's so many more examples of people doing like come together to do more work. But I think that, you know, in you guys being able to come together and do this, I think it just shows how the potential of collaboration in the industry can be. And like a lot of people are just doing things like type designers here and there, you know, building typography and all that, foundries. So just to establish that I really love that aspect. But moving quickly into other aspects of the conversation, which I think will be exciting to discuss as well, because we talk about the creative environment that we're in now, and some of the challenges that we know currently in the creative industry is exposure, right? Exposure, and I mean also like community building, right? Generally, you know, bringing people together. But in the global scheme, like how do creatives from Africa, from Lagos, for example, how do they become like visible to the world? You know, how do they get to showcase their talent? How do they get to showcase? I think David used the word. I think he used the expertise, right? How they actually, the skill they have and the expertise, the nuance that they have. How do they get to tell, you know, someone that is out there that, you know, we actually have these things, like we can actually work at this level. And I think that the Huddle is one platform where I know that when people talk about their work, it shows the in-depth, like how deep they've gone to do like research, or the amount of hours or whatever that's taking them to do that kind of work. So I'd like you to speak on, like, in terms of like showcasing work, what do you think is lacking in the African context of, you know, the creative community or the creative landscape of Africa or Nigeria as an example? What is really lacking in that space? Why are founders, or why are companies in the rest of the world, in the West, why are they finding it difficult to trust African-based creatives?
So I think like maybe to give a bit of like structure towards answering, because that's a very heavy weighted question, right? But for us with the Huddle, we kind of like have two objectives, right? The first objective is the event itself, where people gather together. So it's a safe space for creatives to come out of their shells, be it, you know, office structures, their homes, right? And come to experience what's happening within their vicinity. So we bring a speaker who is churning, like David mentioned, churning out like really awesome work, but they don't have like necessarily like a public documentation of what they're doing, right? So we kind of like set that up in a way where they come to show their work. People then, you know, come to our events, right, with the perspective of they get to have an in-depth preview, you know, into this person's thought process, thinking, all that, right? Then the second part for us is, after the event, our main objective is documentation, right? And what we're doing with our YouTube channel, you know, serves as a primary front for documentation, and it's kind of like building a case. Going to like the question itself, right? Like that gap, we think that, you know, one of the first things we've noticed is we don't have like in-depth documentation of what is possible or what we're achieving, you know, in the creative space in Africa as it's done in other places, right? You know, I was literally on a live session yesterday where the design team of Lovable were literally talking through their experience, because they just recently raised, right? And you kind of like wonder like how many, you know, African companies raise, but we don't actually get like the creative perspective. And that's just from like the product side, right? There are other people doing like, you know, other stuffs in their own specific spaces, right? Where the adequate documentation to spotlight that on global platforms aren't really there, right? So for us, it's more like we're kind of like trying to bridge that gap, right? And also building that level of global exposure, right? So anybody anywhere can stumble on the Huddle to actually have a perspective of what creatives in Africa can achieve, right? And they're able to then see that, oh wow, like this is really good work, this is really awesome work. Oh wow, I never knew that there are people in Africa that are churning out things on the level. And our objective with that in the long run, right, our long-term plan is that, these global companies or global initiatives can then use that as a justification to say, hey, we want to do something in Africa, right? There are people in Africa that we can partner with or collaborate with, rather than sending people down here to achieve the work, right? Or we want to achieve something or speak to a certain demography, we can actually collaborate with, cross-functional creatives, right? And actually consider like the African space. So I think like the most important gap that we've noticed and we're trying to really fill with what we do at the Huddle is the documentation. That's why like our events are very highly documented, right? Like we kind of like really prioritize how we actually record these sessions, just to make sure that we're getting like the most value out of it, right? And it can outlive just that single day where everybody gathered together, and people all around the world. We've had people in like the UK, give comments on the Huddle saying, hey, wow, like this is so amazing, and these are even like people not necessarily exposed to like what's happening in like the African creative space. And why we use the African creative space is we kind of like realize that there are different silos, right? Because of how big Africa is, there are different silos of creative clusters in different places that platforms find it difficult to, present these people. Everybody want to kind of like make it structured in some way. There's Pan-African, there's West African, all that. But we really just believe that like building that overall documentation, spotlighting these people, right, would actually help bridge that gap and, build that trust over time from a global perspective.
Absolutely. Agreed. I think I want to digress a bit. I want to digress to a slightly more interesting side of your work. I mean, everything you said, spot on. I think deeply resonates with me as well. But I want to digress a bit. David, I think I want you to speak a bit about your own angle of the Huddle, because I believe you see Huddle from same perspective, but more like the creative side of it. So I saw one of your sessions and it was you guys talking through your creative process, like coming up with the brand system and all that. And I think David is the chairman on that one, on that aspect. So David, in a few words, like what was like, I know you shipped up, you shipped the identity fast. Like for me, when I was coming up like with the initial logo for the podcast, I did it in like one night and that was it. I just did a logo and just put it up, right? Because I just didn't want to get in my head and start doing too much. So for you, what was that like? Like, how did you iterate the ideas to come up with this system? Because I know you've built it into a system now, but like how, what was the process like?
To be honest, I think first thing that I realized was to set like parameters, because because it helps me not to overthink. Because one thing I've realized with especially the audio posters is that sometimes I start to overthink them, and so I set parameters that do not allow me. I kind of from the get-go I know what I cannot do and what I can do. So when I'm mind mapping, I also like factor in what I shouldn't do, because one thing that people usually do when they're like putting together mood boards and all is what they want to do, but they don't actually take time to maybe set the rules of what it should not look like, because that helps you, so you can already tell that it's going the wrong direction from the get-go. Like you don't have to go so far because there's no time, so you don't have to go so far to then realize, compared to like designing for like commercial purpose or for clients, like it's easy for you to do a lot of iterations and you keep going till when you find that sweet spot. But unlike that, it's usually a case of, there's no time. What should I do? What should I not do? And then I just get right into it.
So so walk me through your process for like creating that identity, like that logo, that system. What, like, did you have did you already get the idea from the go and then you just said, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do. This is my vision.
So I opened Illustrator that day. Okay, I think I was with like two friends that day. Opened Illustrator, I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And that's when, like, there's something I like to do when I'm working. I like to talk to people weirdly. Like, I enjoy talking to people when I'm working because sometimes it helps validate or invalidate some random thoughts that I have very fast. So, like, while I was working, I was like, oh, what do you think about a logo that's... So we are saying that we are trying to create a space for honest conversation, and like everything can fit into this platform. Like, as much as we have like criteria for the type of speakers that we have, but it's not like, oh, there's a proper system that is very structured, like a regular shape that you would see that is very structured, that's, oh, okay, this is what it looks like. So we have like different people. So the shapes are going to be very dynamic from time to time. And that was it. I was like, oh, the kind of people that are going to come, because we're trying to cover the entire creative industry, not just design or art. So because of that, different shapes and different minds are going to be molding this platform. And that was it. I was like, okay, I did the audio logo. Then I saw that I just typed the audio like on a stack. I remember. Then I was like, oh no, it looks too defined. Then I moved the E like this. I was like, oh, then I drew a shape over it. I was like, oh, I think I like that shape. I moved the shape out. Then I started creating like different shapes like that now became like a pattern for like what we use on our header and for YouTube thumbnails. So like shapes that just form like different things depending on the type of person that is coming. And that was it. It was just one night and we're done. It now became a thing of, okay, so after the identity was done, while that identity was great, I was thinking of the posters from something that, of course, I mean, I would, maybe sometimes I'll say it's a toxic relationship in Nigeria, but like, I'm really proud of like a lot of things that come from this place, and that's one of the reasons why I do a lot of things. Like, even apart from the audio, I collect Nigerian vernacular designs. I do all of like things that revolve around Nigerian space. Most of my inspirations are usually Nigerian as opposed to like getting from the West. Like, I'm always trying to draw patterns and connect dots from things that are around me. So yeah, because of that, I was thinking, oh, what would a Nigerian system for posters actually look like? Something that people will say, what's that? Like, like people actually pause to look at, not even to even attend the event, but something that feels like, oh, okay, what is that? And that was the goal for the posters.
Yeah, that one definitely hits. That one definitely hit home. Like, I think the most iconic posters I've seen in Nigeria are all on the Huddle. Like the most iconic Nigerian centric posters. I think when I just go through your feed, I'm just like, what asset have you guys not used? Like, what have you not used? What material or platform have you not used? I'm looking at some now, and I'm just like, guy.
There's something that David didn't share, in the poster journey. The first ever poster that we had for the Huddle, David literally went to Shomolu, and if you know Shomolu is like the heart of, no jokes, and he went to look for designers there, right, to kind of like commission them to create like the first poster. And he's like,
I think I heard that part of your session.
And I think that was like really, really it for us from there. Like, because going that far, like to really kind of like put something together really broke the construct, right, of what a system should look like, moving forward. And I think like that's why like you mentioned, in terms of like our collaboration, right? For me, I'm heavily dependent on what David does creatively. Like, we don't have, feedback loop like version 1, version 2. Like, we don't have that. And that's just because like it's meant to really capture and express, communication, right? And it stems into how we structure our events, how we think about, our approach to like communication overall, right? We kind of like have this collaboration process that is not heavily constrained, right? Like, anybody can go through any length, right, towards what we're trying to achieve. So we kind of like don't put barriers of limitations already ahead, even though like we have, like David mentioned, like there are things that we don't try to emulate. A good example is like the Huddle. Even though the community formed itself, right? Like we don't have a WhatsApp platform, we don't have any platform where people are on that is called a community, right? And there's actually a community around the Huddle, right? There are people who are expressly Huddle people, right? Without us necessarily saying, hey, so there are things that we decided that this is what we're not going to look like, even just from like the overall approach and how we wanted to be perceived by people.
I think the point you just made now, I think is such a great point, because I mean, I'm still also very new to this and I'm still learning, but I think one of the things that because for me it's been like a continuous journey, like you just keep learning. Like, and I was going to make a post one time about how sometimes you can like create a roadmap like for your product, in quotes this time, Huddle for you guys, for me, and you can have like an idea, just an idea, and you start it and you have like a roadmap or plans and or so whatever. But then the thing starts to shape itself in a different direction. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. Because sometimes, like, you're still around this community thing. Like, okay, so for example, you said you had like, you don't want to have certain, how you do want to position your brand, right? And eventually the community still builds itself. Like, people still lean towards it. They still gravitate towards it. So like, my point is that it's never like a one-way street. There's never like a template for how you must do things or how you should, like, oh, if you want to do a show or you want to do a podcast, you must have this. Nah. For me, I just feel like if people resonate with you or with what you're doing, they're going to gravitate towards it, wherever system, or as long as you're, having work, like people are seeing the work, right? I think that's just something I just wanted to point out as well in just building community generally. I had a question that was going through my mind as you were speaking as well, and it was about some of the challenges, right, of building a platform like this. And people are going to be watching this and they're going to be wondering, oh, okay, you guys, obviously, do you have a sponsor? Are you self-funded? Do people pay to attend your events? How do people get into, being at the event? All those kind of questions. And as a founder, these are some questions that will also probably be going through your minds, like, okay, how do we scale this? Like, how do we grow, right? How do we sustain this? So I would like, I don't know who is best to speak on this. I feel like it's still probably going to be Samuel, because Samuel seems like that strategy person, or maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, whichever of you, or maybe you can take turns as well. But like, what has been the experience of like building from scratch? From, I don't know, did you guys get like funding already? Maybe I don't know. Maybe you got like some grants or something. What has that been like?
I guess we can definitely both speak on it, because we kind of like we run it very connected. So the when it comes to like the overall vision of the Huddle. Okay, so let's start from the major one, funding, right? I think this will make it like our third year running the Huddle, which is huge. And since day one, we've literally been bootstrapping, right? So every Huddle production you've seen, events, right, has been bootstrapped. And in bootstrapping, what we've then had is there have been people from Huddle community, who have then said, hey, what you guys are doing is amazing, right? How can I contribute, right? And we've actually had people, just give towards the Huddle, right? Big shout out to Bellows, shout out to OG, right? Those two people are so instrumental for us, and every other person, right? But so we've kind of like always been bootstrapping. We've not, and I don't think it's something that we plan to do. We don't plan to make the event paid, right? Because at the end of the day, there's something we're trying to build. There's a ripple effect that the Huddle is meant to cause in like the African creative ecosystem, right? And as many people as we can bring into the room, right? We try to, as much as possible, get that exposure to everyone, right? From like the different like demographics. We kind of like already have like, we're trying to like create products around the Huddle, obviously, that then can now, be monetized. We tried to do like a merch drop, which kind of like did well, the day that we dropped it, right? But in terms of like the overall funding side of things, like it's really been bootstrapped, right? Major challenges would be for what we're doing, right? Getting the right partnerships or people that would actually align with the vision of what we're doing has not been that direct, right? It's not as direct as, if you were a customer or consumer facing startup, right? Where you are building a digital product, trying to like raise and scale. Like this is a bit more different. So there aren't necessarily direct pipelines towards like how do you fund something like this, and even if they are, right, it's more like the grant side of things where you kind of have to like build a bit more trust or build a bit more foundation before actually getting into those types of systems. So that's like one of the major challenges, right? The other side of it is just when you're running a physical event. I mean, I can't even go into like the different stories we've had, right? But we've always been able to find the right spaces, right? And I think I'll let David talk about like one of the partnerships that we recently got, which was really good. But moreover, it's just been like we've just been doing this based on let's just keep moving, right? Like since day one of the Huddle, we've just been moving, right? We've not been overthinking, but we believe that with the new things we're trying to put out, like I mentioned, like we're trying to like build products around the Huddle, things like putting together like the master class, because we kind of like noticed there's a big gap between people or creatives actually going from mid-level and crossing into that senior level. We're not thinking about the entry level of trying to like get into these skills. We're more focused on getting the people already in these skills who have been doing this for 2-3 years, right? But are finding it very difficult to cross, like how did, a Shei become a Shei that we know now? Like what steps did he take to cross, into that level? Because it's not just, you understand, right? So how did a knee cross into, creative directing at the level that he's at? So we're trying to like put together something around that where our goal is to really help people from a mid perspective, like a mid-design, mid-creative perspective, cross into more, because that's where we can start to build global trust. If we have more senior level people who understand what it means to be senior, right, we can start to then think about, like global exporting, more collaborations, and even, through the Huddle, being able to leverage that to connect people with more global opportunities.
Okay, so yeah, I think someone mentioned like the most part. Huddle has been funded by myself and Samuel for the longest. So that was an intentional decision at the start for us not to sort for funding or some form of partnership, and that was because we were trying to build like a very solid foundation. And what that looked like was a solid foundation that when people are partnering with us, they are keen into some of the values that we already hold, as opposed to coming on board and helping us like shape some things. And we are very careful about not going like a particular direction that we were not on course for before that time, because of maybe the kind of funding that is coming in, or because of the type of people or brand that is trying to key into it. So we're very intentional about that, like setting the solid foundation before we then start attracting partnerships. Because one thing I found is that when you set a very good foundation, people buy into it because they believe that, oh, this thing is very cool, as opposed to you having to sell and do a lot of selling. Because first of all, I know I've worked for I've done campaigns and a lot of marketing work, but I don't like the idea of forceful selling and trying to overpitch something. So I feel like it's just going to sell once you can position very well, it's just going to go from there.
Typical designer behavior. It comes with the package.
Sorry.
Let me tell you, when I sit in presentations, honestly, I feel like it's a weakness because I've also worked in marketing, which is crazy, right? But not the sales aspect of marketing, more of the strategy, brand design aspect. And yeah, that's part of once I say you the vision, the idea, and you just say, carry my bag and move. Because if it's not clear to you on day one, I'm sorry, I cannot convince you. So I feel you on that one. Yeah. I'm on that same page, 100%. 100%.
Yes. So that's pretty much how we're thinking about it. And like you said, there are a lot of people that have been instrumental to our growth, even without us putting out the word. Some has mentioned Bellows, OG. There's also Sheik that has contributed in terms of he has contributed to our growth in many ways. And yeah, we hit would I say a roadblock sometime this year, but the good thing about it was that roadblock morphed into a very solid partnership with Paystack. And what that did for us was, initially when we hit that roadblock, we're like, okay, where do we go from here? And it was not until I had the conversation with someone at Paystack and they were open to the idea of partnering with them and even using their space for the event, and boom, that's what birthed the current partnership that we have with Paystack. And it came just, I think, at the last Huddle, so it's very fresh, very new, but we are very hopeful for what that would go into and what that scale would look like.
That's such an interesting, or that's such a good one, because my next question or my next insight or discussion was going to be about I feel like there's something around how creative conversations feel a bit for a lot of people, for the mainstream audience, right? Because over time, especially in this side of the world, there hasn't been that intentional documentation or intentionality to getting people to actually understand, oh, this is actually what it takes to do this kind of work. And I think we spoke about it a bit. And then I think it was David that said something about people don't value the aesthetics. They don't see value in the aesthetics, right? If something looks or feels good, they just think it happens by chance or something, because okay, what does it take? We see that every time, okay, what does it take to really put this together? And but saying how an organization like Paystack has now been able to foster or collaborate with you guys with the Huddle to, they obviously see value in it, and that's something that you don't find everywhere, because I know a lot of creative podcasts that the founders are all running by themselves. It's just maybe they get some money from one person, from this person, but there's so much potential to do more. So I feel this is also to say that, the industry is growing, right? The awareness is coming up. We're having more events, we're having more documentation, but it feels like we've lost a lot of years and time, of not doing these things. And now it feels like our generation is paying for it because, you see people I can't remember this man's name. His name always eludes me when I need to remember it. The man that's been designing Fela's album cover. Right. Lemmy Garioku. That man is a legend. He's a legend. And I don't think anybody has really done any document. I mean, I think people have started documenting because I saw one archive that has like album covers from like almost all the album covers by Africans or something. That was really good. But it came like last year or something, like someone did it. Someone just said, let me just do this, right? But in other countries, you see like archives, like from way back, like as far back as you really want to look. You see libraries with actual documented work of creatives, and those kind of things kind of push the narrative further. Like, okay, creatives can actually appear in a formal environment. Like you can actually study their work. You can put metrics to their work, and which in turn brings value, right? Because at the end of the day, people want to know that, oh, this thing is valuable. Like at the end of the day, someone wants to consume this, someone wants to watch this and, pay for it or something, because it's a capitalized world. Like it's all about money, like at the end of the day. But I'm really just happy that you mentioned that Spacestack now has been able to partner with you guys to keep the conversation going. I think we just move forward. But David, were you about to say something? Oh, okay. All right. So moving on now, let's speak a bit about the industry, like the creative community that we're building now, and like the general creative landscape in Nigeria. What are some of during our chat, I think we spoke a bit about some like concerns or like some issues that creatives face in the industry. Like, I think we spoke earlier about it, but I feel like we still need to talk a bit more about it. Like exporting our talents globally. Like, what's the biggest challenge with getting people to be visible online? Like, what makes, what positions an African creator, in an environment where they are equally accessible to a recruiter from anywhere in the world? What's the difference between, like, I could keep asking that question in different ways, but you get what I'm saying? What makes us what's going to make us that valuable or that visible to the world, essentially?
Okay. There's one thing I always say is Nigerian creative space or Nigerian creativity generally, it needs honest conversations. I'll say this thing, we are good, we are really good, but are we ready? So we have a lot of people building in silos. We have people, like we said, people always showing like the outcomes. So we need to grow from that place where it's like, oh, see what I built to, and here's how I built this. Because what that does is that it enlightens more people, and then that vulnerability now then becomes our superpower, because there are more people that know about that type of process. Because we do not have structured design training or it's only fine arts that I know that still has, like, even at that, I wouldn't say it's the most structured compared to like global standards. So we have that gap. So the only way we can actually move is to move together. And how do we move together? Is by having this honest conversation. Because what we currently have as of today is the silent struggle where this person is building in his own room, and he's trying to figure out a lot of things on his own. And because of it will show us just the outcome, people don't even know how they could have. They don't know how they would have even received help, like in the process, and they do not know how they could have helped somebody with their process. So I feel like vulnerability is our superpower, and if we start to have this honest conversation about our process more, it helps us as a collective to build something that lasts. And there's a way I say the world cannot snub us, because we are moving beyond that solo act where we are just doing things, because there's a whole army coming. Because one thing that I find out is sometimes even some of the biggest collaborations that happen in the country, or some of the creatives that even like share their story, they always share their story from the perspective of how somebody was reached out to, and then they reached out to them because they kind of like understand their process and know their work. So it means that if we move beyond that solo act, when somebody is reached out to, it can always put like more people on, because there's the army that is growing together. Like, it's not like, and sometimes one of the reasons why people don't collaborate is because there's that gap in skill. Like, the gap between a senior designer and a regular designer is always very far. or maybe an artist becomes the experience. Like somebody that's exhibited like some galleries, and some people that are just like starting out and do not even know how to price their work. So we need this type of honest conversations. We need more open spaces where people are having this conversation, and then we can grow together and build something that lasts. And then the world has no option than to just pay attention to us.
Yeah. So for me, I think like about this, even from and what David has said is like definitely one side, but there's also another angle just to add on that is, when we say how can we export, talent globally, or how can we get visibility globally, I think like why we are very interested in the Western, design community is based off of what they've built for themselves, right? The products that we're passionate about, they built it as solutions to their own, problems, right? The companies that we reference, the brand identities that, we're excited about, things that we see them do are things that are done within their community, right? And the mistake that we make on the African side is we have more people with the orientation of replicate. So all we try to do mostly is to copy what is done, right? As opposed to build things, that can actually build things locally that gains the visibility internationally. So one thing is that there's this culture now with the whole, I want to work globally, that has made a lot of designers despise local work or working locally, right? Or made a lot of creative people despise working locally. Yes, there is the pay gap, which obviously it's a huge problem. But one thing that I've realized is the validation that we need to build as a community has to start from what have you achieved where you are, right? Before somebody's going to say, hey, what did they see you doing where you're at to actually qualify you to come over to where they're at, right? And the gap there usually is around our creative thinking, our system thinking. It's a lot of like methodologies that we need to really define in like the African creative space. Like David said, honest conversations, right? Like if we don't tell ourselves the honest truth about our creative approach, right? And it's becoming, a bit daunting, because we find out now that more people spend time, like I mentioned, trying to replicate what is already done, right? And we would always then take that lens of the implementers, like consider these people when you just need people to, like, how's the best way I can put it? So let's use factory work, right? I can design a dress, right? But I don't necessarily need to be the one to make the dress. There would be people working in maybe a factory where I can send them my designs, and those people will produce the amount of quantity, right? We need to take the lens of Africa from the people that produce quantity, right, to people that we can look to for creative thinking. We can look to for new ideas, which is why, like, everybody we bring to the huddle, we're very intentional about, you talking through your process. There has to be a story behind your final product, right? Your final product cannot come from replication alone. Replication is good for inspiration. It's good to build, your skill level. It's good to build your level of exposure and diversity. But at the same time, how can we define what creative thinking is? How can we look at what you've done and start to like understand, the lens behind it, right? Like, this is your approach. This is how you think about solutions more than ever, right? In conversations with global designers, with international creative people that I've been privileged to have, right? They spend more time talking about your thought process more than actual final work, right? And it seems to say, how much time are people actually spending in thought process, right? How much time are you spending in building your capacity to come up with great ideas, right? We don't have people locally who collaborate. There's something that David mentioned where he now collects, local art, and he goes around. I mean, like, people don't want to, validate that, there are things locally here that are unique. And if people are ready to like come together to build on those things, a good example is how like the Japanese ecosystem is, right? Where they have a defined style. They have a defined approach to minimalism. They have a defined, structure to how they design products. I mean, I was watching a documentary on how they have these different signs for restrooms and how they go about their thinking through those designs, right? You walk into, an African establishment, right? And you can't find visual cues that really portray, African thinking. It scales into everything. It scales into how we build, how our interior designs are being done. It scales into the way we think about how we build things around us. How we build our furniture. Everything is currently positioned to replicate, right? And what the global industry is looking for is not they're not looking for people to come and do exactly what they do, because they already have people there that do that, right? And if you're really going to go out there, you need to come from a perspective of this person is bringing something unique, right? And right now, that's the uniqueness gap that we still need to build, right? We have so many people more keen on, what's the word? Maybe fake it till you make it, or, yes, it's great to stay like an artist, but you have to really factor what exactly is the unique thinking. There was something that I've always wondered, like we kind of like don't have like a go-to African, design system where as designers, and this is for me from the product perspective, where, how do you actually design locally for Africans? Like, I want to be able to build a product in Nigeria, or I'm an international company trying to scale into Lagos, Nigeria. What systems are available for me to understand how people think? What's the customer psychology? How do I build efficient experiences that fit this demography? We don't have that, right? And it's sad because we have really awesome products that are being built locally here, and we've had to create our own, experiences, our own flows around our conditions, right? And those things are not necessarily documented as systems for every other person to be able to emulate and, even being able to ship that globally. Like how, and till when we get there, right, we'll still keep having this, like, why is the creative talent not being, expressed globally? And just to add to that, if you look at the entertainment space, that's literally what they have on lock, that the creative space has not yet, gotten into. The entertainment space, the go-to trajectory for every scalable talent, ends up at the global landscape. Wizkid, Ashake, like all the brands, everybody is working with these guys globally, and they've served as that African preservation. The sound is unique. You cannot say it's westernized sound, right? If we can really emulate what's done, and it's something I love to do. I love to look at what's being done in other industries, right? And I think about how do I then replicate what these people are doing in their industries in what I'm doing? Like, what are transferable, approaches or systems that can actually be replicated in my own industry? And I think like what we're doing in like the entertainment space, till we're ready to have honest conversation, there's a lot of collaboration in the entertainment space, right? In our movie production, in music, that until it gets into like the creative landscape, we'll keep having that conversation of what can be done to, position us globally, to be able to ship more talent globally. It happens in the development space. Our developers are built on, collaboration. Developers are trained to think open source, right? To build, to think innovation. And that's why like they can easily gravitate towards a global, landscape, as opposed to the creative space. So till we have, like David mentioned, we have those honest conversations, but also till we start to build what our defined thinking and approach is, we'll still have this bubble of not being able to stand out or not have enough validation to export on a larger scale.
Wow, that was packed. That was packed, Samuel. Okay, so I took a lot of cues and notes from all you just said, and that is so correct. I think when we chatted, we spoke about one of the issues that we have. I mean, you mentioned a lot of things, and I'm going to dive a bit into them. But one thing that I've just taken out is how the music industry has been able to use this system, this same export not import system, to stand out, to create a unique product that cannot be stolen or replicated. And it's something that the creative industry can definitely learn. Because my question was going to be, what can the creative or the design creative industry learn? Because these guys are also creatives, right? The music industry, the film and entertainment industry, they're all the creatives as well. But what can the designer, maybe like the creator economy, what can they learn from this? But I think you've just answered it with what you said, and it's that export mindset. It's that what can we take out of what we have to showcase to the world, rather than what can I copy from there? I think I can't remember. Was it Need? I was saying something that you can't out-rap Jay-Z, right? As a Nigerian rapper, you can't, because these guys are the kings of rap, right? And like when it comes to that kind of music, it's for that demography, right? Like they are the founders, they are like the OGs of that industry. And when it comes to Afrobeat, you cannot sing Afrobeat better than Fela, no matter who you are, right? And that also is a unique aspect of, is what is unique to us. So the question is, what is unique to the African design community or the African design context? What is that thing that is exportable for a Lagos-based designer or a Nigerian-based designer? I think, David, you have something to say on that.
Yeah. So I wrote a piece about this. I think that was like last year or thereabouts, I can't remember. And so the thing, someone also mentioned something about the Japanese culture of minimalism and how that works for them as a system. And I think personally, minimalism is not for us. I've always said this, like I'm always on that hill, and I'll stay on that hill that maximalism feels more like us. Because first of all, I think people do not understand the heritage that we have, and that's largely caused by a lack of documentation. Well, Nigerians are generally loud people. Like even the most conservative Nigerian is still loud when put side by side with an European. Like the way we talk, the way we do things, the way we decorate, the way we used to decorate our houses, our dressing, like we are loud people. The way we celebrate every single thing, we are loud people. So every time I'm always lost as to how minimalism is creeping into like some of the things that we build, because where is the maximalism? Where is our heritage? And that goes on to show that because of the lack of documentation, we are not evolving with our heritage. We are evolving based on things that we have even imported, inspirations that we are importing. And we can see that in every, like, if we can go further into like every part of Nigeria, like even down to like our government. The only reason why somebody will rebrand next 40 years and come and rule us again is because these things are not documented enough for us to even like go back to look at this and understand the havoc that they caused before, and then already project, and we projecting what they could do. So, and thanks to people like archiving that are doing the important work. So, like, documentation is our problem, and that's why we are doing things that is not unique to us, and that's why we are competing in a global market and looking like other people. Why not being them? So there's this thing I always say: someone that is born in maybe London and someone that is born in Ikorodu, if I consume a lot of, no matter the amount of London content that I consume, I'm not there. I'm not a native. So when I start to implement things, it feels like I'm mirroring somebody as opposed to creating from an inborn state. But if I take that lens of my Ikorodu communal living and I filter it with the exposure that I have from my London exposure, it becomes something different. And that's something that we can then export. So I feel like one of the things that we'll be doing is we have been playing it safe. Like, we have been playing it safe too much, and that's not us.
You're saying all the things that tickling my ears, because when someone went into this tangent, I was just like, yes, I love it. And I think thinking about it now, when we mentioned Sheyi, and I mean, I'll just use him as an example. I mean, Sheyi started, I think when he started posting work, after a short period, he went into typography and started doing downfall, right? And I think he clocked that thing, because I asked him when he came on the session. I was like, when did you clock this thing? Because me, I think I'm a designer. I'm just in one lost world, doing whatever bullshit I was doing. I mean, not like what I'm doing is superb or anything, but I was not thinking that way. Like, I wasn't even in that frame of mind. And I think I was just removed, right? I'll use myself as an example of someone that was removed from that cultural connection, because, different people have different backgrounds and different exposure levels, even as we're in Nigeria or as we're in Africa. Trust me, people are living in Africa, but they are not experiencing Africa. There are people like that, right? I was one of those people. So, growing up, for me, I was kind of disconnected from culture because of the kind of upbringing I had. I was very sheltered, right? But someone on the other hand, who was very up, going out, very, experiencing, the Lagos life, the fast-paced lifestyle, experiencing culture as you might, in whatever form, maybe has a better connection, right? But where am I going? She started doing that downfall, typography thing. And I feel like since then he clocked it, and he mentioned an example of some things that have been designed, right? Because it was like, when I was like, what are you saying? Like, are you telling me design has existed? Not like I didn't realize it, but it's actually true. Like, he made an example of a project that I can't remember this guy's name now. Is one of the people that are also big on this Afrocentric or African-based design. He did this thing that, this thing that people carry, that they used to hawk stuff, the thing that Akosbelo, right? Yeah, that's him. So the work he did, documenting that thing as design, exactly, the local store. And there's so many people doing this now. I actually have a line of people that I'm I really want to chat with you guys. I want to have a conversation with you guys that have kind of gone back and looked at some of the, should I say, local items, right? The vernacular items that we've been using. I saw one guy did a market store, an umbrella market store. I have him on my line as well. A market store. He went and redesigned, rejigged the market store, that umbrella thing that Airtel gives you now, that all these guys give you. He remodeled that thing from an umbrella into a store that has arms and, can carry baskets and stuff. Right? I can't remember his name right now, but that's just an example. So back to what I'm saying, these things have been going on, but we just haven't paid attention to it because, again, it wasn't documented. Nobody actually said, oh, look, this is actually some design. Who actually designed this thing? Who was the guy that actually came up with this idea? Nobody knows. Then who created the downfall style, the downfall writing style? Who knows? Nobody knows. Then, but it took someone to take that little cue, and that's the guy. Yeah, Yakubu. Yeah, Paul Yakubu. Yeah. He's I think he's an architect as well. I mean, which makes sense because that thing was a bit structural as well, because you have to resolve the weight and all that. But yeah, that's just another example of people taking the everyday items and just looking at it using another eyes to look at it. This thing is designed, it's not just by chance, and you see the intentionality that went into it. And I follow some pages that actually take some things and just be oh, this thing, do you actually know this is why they designed it like this? Mundane things like pestle and mortar, everyday things. But the way they designed them they can be forever. Like almost like they don't even need to do any. There doesn't need to be a version 2 of all those things. And so I just think that Sheyi, as an example, he clocked this thing and he started doing that downfall typography type, and I think it just made him stand out instantly. And I've seen people now doing this because, you know, I think what's this guy's name that's also done can't remember his name right now. Can you guys remind me? Jobosin, right? Thank you, Jobosin. Jobosin has done, he's done this mechanical style, and also done this. What's the other one? The Ojuju, and you see the thing, like people are taking, like globally, people are using it like all over. You're like, like that's what I'm talking about. So I think that's just an example of how this could play out, right? How exporting African-based design style globally, and people are, I think, like I said, I think it's like you're building slowly. It's not going to be as fast, because it's just how many people doing this now. But like on a global scale, it's going to bring more exposure, and then the more people do this, the more we get that visibility over time as well.
I think like while you were talking, I think one of the things that would always be really important is to define words in their literal terms. What does it mean to export, right? And what is the foundation around exporting? It's usually a location has let's use raw resources, right? That another location does not have, but the other location needs those raw resources to thrive, right? So there would be an export of that resources from point A into point B, right? And it's always around, I don't have this, or I don't have enough of this to meet my demand, right? If we play that with like the design landscape, right? The global perspective is not that they don't have enough designers to meet demand. Like, let's be honest, there are a ton of designers everywhere around the world, right? So we need to always identify what exactly is the unique, raw source that these people globally are looking for, right? That they are willing to export. I don't have the answer to that, to be honest, because I think that it's something that would happen in conversations of people who have been privy to either work globally or based on their work, right? They've been, spotlighted globally and requested for, right? Or businesses or individuals have reached out to them to say, hey, I love what you do. I've been following your work and I would love you to, collaborate with me on this. I think that with getting those in-depth stories, which is why, the Huddle is really crucial in documenting those stories, we can actually start to build a pattern, right? And from there, we can actually start to define that if we, there's a book called Outliers, which I really love, because it was talking about, it was more like a research case study of what makes people successful. Is it luck? Is it timing? And the book goes across different stories of individual people who were in the same line, same trajectory, one who either became successful, one who failed, maybe had more promise but failed. If we're able to get more of these stories, like open conversations, we can actually start to like document what were these crucial points for these individual people that gained them that global access. And I believe from there, we can then start to build patterns and build systems around that to say...
That's one is the one.
Exactly.
That's it. You've just hit the nail on the head. You've just hit the nail on the head. That crucial point, because I keep going back to my conversation with Sheyi. I asked him one question. I was like, what exactly did you do that made Pentagram reach out to you? Because that had never happened before. That had never, correct me if I'm wrong, that had never happened that I know of before in Nigeria. That at that level, I needed to know. And he answered. He said, the crazier thing, it wasn't even Cowrywise project or Paystack. It was one restaurant, Coffee Club. Guess what? Coffee Club is just a club. It's not even a, huge thing. It's just the project is not one of his most popular projects. So I think it just corroborates everything that we've just been talking about. And it speaks to me because I'm not even claiming to be perfect or anything. Like there's still so much for me to learn as well. But just that example of how, because he did talk about it. He spoke about his conversation with the partner that reached out to him at Eddie Opara at Pentagram. You probably watched it already, so you already know this thing. This because you're just quoting me. Yeah, like he said it was that project that made, like he was wondering how, and that made a lot of sense, even corroborating everything we're saying. My next question was going to be that what does a future, exposed African creative community, globally relevant African creative community, what does it look like? What does it look like? What's the picture like? Have you ever imagined it?
I think I'll give my answer in one word, and I'll let David, answer. I think, to be honest, it's collaboration. If we collaborate more, we can build more sustainable, let me use the word, projects that can create a global attraction that we need. It's not going to be one individual, superstar, right? It's not going to be the same thing for music and even with music, trust me, it's not just the artist. Your producer matters, your record label matters.
Probably like 70%
matters. Exactly. So that collaboration and sometimes it's features. You see artists after one feature with maybe a David-Udoh, from there it changes their career trajectory. Collaboration needs to happen. Like, we need to move outside, survival. A lot of our creative people are attached, and it's not a bad place to be, because at the end of the day, like, you have to survive. But till we move out of the base and core of our expression from a survival standpoint and remove our individual egos, like, everybody would have a playing field. No, not everybody's going to be on the same level, obviously, right? But everybody will have a playing field, and people can then now piggyback off, these existing things, right? For example, for me, I'm a strong, product of early days dribble meetups, right? Those were like the formative years of my career. Those were some of the things that, really positioned me to be able to start to work internationally or work with international companies, right? It changed everything for me. Exposure to knowing, there's a Shein in Nigeria. Exposure to knowing there are some other coded people. There's Bobby. Most people don't know some of the major products that Bobby designed end to end. Like, just Bobby designing apps in this country. Like, Bobby was sought after, and he's still sought after, and he's not public facing, right? You understand what I mean? So when that collaboration comes in, where people can work together irrespective of where they are at to commit towards an objective, right? A good example is we need more open source projects that there can be open contributions to across Africa. So I think collaboration is where is the foundation of what the future of our ecosystem is going to look like. It's what has worked. It's what is working in the movie industry. The moment Nollywood transitions from I want to be individual to they collaborate, they are all in each other's movies, they are all promoting each other's movies. Like, everybody is, and the same thing with the most recent side, influencer marketing, right? Influencers are plugging themselves. They are always in each other's videos, right?
They're the biggest,
it's working for them
in terms
so much.
Of giving away information. Yeah.
So if we really replicate that, we must always understand what works for us locally, what has worked for other people, how that can be. I'm just a very firm believer in, you don't always have to stumble into a pathway. A pathway can be crafted. You can, really get instructions or structure from existing experiences and then start to formulate that, not with rigidity of or a rigid mindset of the fact that I have to do it exactly like this, but you should be able to find cues, right, to help you understand overall of how can we also, achieve what these people are achieving, right? We have influencers now being flown out of the country by Meta, right? How many designers are being flown out of the country to must attend Figma events, right? Or Adobe is doing an event and they're like, hey, we need these guys from Nigeria to be here, right? How many of those events are happening, on a larger scale? So I think like collaboration is definitely what we need to lean into. It would help us, one, begin to bridge the gap between seniority and mid-level. I don't like to use the word junior because I think juniors should always go through the natural process of finding their fit, right? Like go through the learning courses, all that, be comfortable enough to be a junior designer, right? That's the only way you can then move to a mid-level. But from mid-level to senior, like David mentioned, like it's a huge gap. And it's actually very difficult to even collaborate because there's a level of speed and intensity that you as a senior creative would want to work at, that you have to develop a level of patience and willingness to, instruct, right? To work with mid-level range designers or creative people, because it's not just on a skill set level. There are, ways of thinking, right? And it stems like for myself, right? I have senior people that I'm exposed to that has really defined a lot of processes for me. Likewise, David, we have I think that collaboration would actually bridge the gap with mentorship, and other important individual lines, but it would start from collaboration towards goals or objectives, right? Open source projects. Not everything has to be, transactional, right? Just passionate about a cause and being able to work towards that cause collectively.
Yeah, I think people should also be creative because there's so many ideas. There's so many things. And also, I push some of my people, my own little community and, creatives around me. Just have a passion project, just have something. You're doing it for fun. You don't even have to publish it. Just have it. You don't have to it doesn't have to be a brief because briefs can be very constrained, it can be very restrictive or something. You have when you're doing a fintech product, for example, how much Afrocentric fusion can you really make on that? Because they're obviously designing for, user behavior and all that. And it's very streamlined. The process for that is already there's a template kind of. I mean, you can, maybe there's some wiggle way around it or something, but to a large extent, you might not have a lot of room to explore. But with your passion project, you can do more exploration. You can do whatever you want. I have a passion project I'm working on personally now, and I'm trying to do things differently, trying to approach it from a less restrictive lens. So I think that's just something I want to also add to that point about, not paying for shipping fee, like you said. So that's such an interesting one. So the future, right? I think, we are all eager to see this future. Collaboration is huge, right? I think you guys have made solid points on collaboration. How does a product designer, an emotion designer, and a brand designer come together to create a masterpiece or a project, right? Use any project as an example. There's definitely at least 3 creatives that can work on a project at any given time. 3 different creatives with different expertise that can work on any project at any given time. So the question is, why can't they come together instead of one person trying to do everything? I'm the motion designer, I'm the type designer, I'm the product designer, I'm the logo designer. It feels like you said, I think someone made the point about designing for survival or creating for survival. Let me use the word creating because people also we have writers as well. So it's not just design. So creating for survival rather than for impact. I'll use the word impact, right? And I think it's a systemic thing because I see how it has come. Like I think I mentioned this in our chat as well. Like how I think the only form of education system that we currently have, the only form of formal education that I know of. But David had a different opinion on that. I said it was only architecture, but David said, no, we have I said even the graphic design, I don't know about it. Like that shows you how exposed it is or how accessible it is. Because if I was so close to it and yet I didn't know about it, then really was it really there like that? I mean, it's debatable to me. But when it comes to like formal education, like for design, I feel like my own experience of architecture school was kind of like an unhealthy competition where you're like trying to outdo the next person, right? That was the system that was there. Like you were built for survival. We were trained to outdo the next person. And I think most people just carry that mentality out of uni and took it to practice. And that's why architecture is suffering for it, for me, in my opinion, because everybody is trying to create their own practice. Everybody is trying to design, collect all the money, in fact, if you allow an architect, they will do structural self by themselves. They will do structural design. They will do everything, because at the end of the day, the clients probably don't even paying well, right? They're probably paying some, money that you can't even mention. I mean, I've had experience when someone was offering me like 20K for a whole design. That was the last straw. I just left architecture for good, after that experience, because I was like, I'm not doing this. Like, I can't do 7 years of architecture school and then you're offering me 20K to do a design. But I feel like it's a systemic issue, because after you've done school, like after you've done all that, then you now get offered that. Then what option do you have when you're offered that kind of money? Like you now want to split 20K with 3 designers. Like what's there? Like it's not even enough to buy data to even do the work. Do you get what I'm saying? So I feel that it's something that has been, I think it has been like, it's something that exists in our Nigerian context, in our African context. Like we're just always struggling. Like everybody's just like let me just eat. Like let me just eat. That kind of thing. And I think we need to outgrow that, right? I think with examples of things that we mentioned now, it just goes to say that we need to outgrow that mentality and start to do work that is actually going to be impactful, right? Which is why I suggested doing passion project, because at the end of the day, clients can have, briefs and whatever, and they can revise and say, oh, they don't want this, they don't want that. One project is yours and you can do whatever you want with it, right? So that's just my point about how I think, people can also approach and some of the things that also contribute to how we are as people, right? I don't know, maybe someone is working on maybe creating like a design school that will be more collaborative inclined. I think that would be really good, where people are coming together to do group projects instead of all the time you're just doing, competing. And then also, I think they're also judging the work, because I know that we were always just presenting and people just do all sorts of things just to make sure that they present the work to be the best thing since sliced bread. But the work is actually not as great because, but if your presentation skills are very good, like, I mean, I'm just saying this to buttress the point that, I feel like these things are, because when you look at issues, they don't just come from nowhere. They come from something. Like it builds up to that issue that we have. So it didn't just occur overnight. If you look at the copying issue as well, it's also connected to this, right? People like, I think we made an example of someone that was, a lot of people just started doing Guinness World Records. A lot of people just started, Mommy London did this challenge thing when she was in the phone. Then next thing, someone to do this. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, ideas are everywhere. Just do your own thing. But I think, culturally, that survival mindset. We need to.
Can I add something on my collaboration?
Yeah, please.
One aspect is even with the Huddle, right? David can speak on it. Some of like the posters that you see out, like David actually would reach out to certain people to collaborate with them, right? Like, and this is just little cues, little additions. It's not even necessarily like, oh, contracts, create poster or stuff like that, right? Like there are people that like, you know, I mean, there's this logo montage that we had on the Huddle where it had like different creative expressions of the logo, right? And this was like something that was just literally open source, you know, and it was also David also spoke about it in our video on It's the Huddle, right? Like where we had like different artists just collaborate and create their own expressions, you know, of the Huddle logo. And I think like it must be two perspectives. There must be on the individual's level the willingness to open up your ideas for collaboration, right? And on the collaborator level, the willingness to collaborate, you know, within the ideas or the, let me not use the word constraints, but within the ideas presented. Usually, I think like for us as like the creative space, like you mentioned, we like to do our own thing, right? Even when we're brought to collaborate, right? Each person wants to do something uniquely different rather than like work together, right? Like, so even if you say this is an open source project, right? And this is what we are looking for, you know, simple terms, we want this, right? You find out that like, rather than working together towards pushing out one individual things, it's multiple people trying to bring their different ideas and trying to convince whose idea should be picked, right? So collaboration itself as a skill must be taught, right? We need to be able to understand that iterations, right, is what leads to final products, not final products from the get-go. And iterations can come in form of not just in terms of implementation alone, but conversations, right? David mentioned a good example, like when he's working on things, he just likes having like conversations. For me, I like talking to people from different industries, right? I like understanding like what you do in your job. You know, if you run a food business, I want to know like, how do you go about running your food business? Like, what are you doing? What are your day-to-day, you know, activities that builds up to what, you know, going as far as even like taking a cooking class, right? Just to like understand the pressure. And I'm like, oh man, I don't think I can cook for a living. It's not about whether, you know, it's something that I've seen that like there's a level of mental dexterity that needs to go into that, right? To be able to cook for a number of people and do it on a daily basis, right? So those different things, those conversations and iterations, right, helps towards like collaboration. And it's something that must be taught. People must learn how to collaborate. It's currently something we don't have, right? And we see that like you mentioned, even at the highest level, at the political, governmental level, like you see, even in political parties, there's no collaboration, you know, even in our House of Reps, there's no collaboration. So we don't actually have collaboration as a culture. It's not a cultural thing. And I was under like a session, and I can't remember if it was Iweibo that said this, that there was a study done on the Igbo people approach towards apprenticeship. And they realized that like it was a more solid foundation than even the actual university process. Like the apprenticeship of, you first work in this person's shop, then after some time you go open your own shop. From there, then you also bring other people to work in your shop. They have that as an actual process, and we can actually see it over time. That's why like they lead like the industrial part, you know, of the country, because they have a system, and that's what we talk about. Like that system was actually studied, you know, like an Harvard study was done on that particular system of apprenticeship, and you also realize that like apprenticeship is something that is so involved in like the creative process, right? You find that the best artists would look for, you know, when you hear their early days of their career, you hear, oh, they used to work at this record store, where they used to sell records. From there, they used to listen to music, and that was how they started writing their rap. Like there's this level of apprenticeship exposure that the early days designers in Africa, we had that. For a good example for me, I actually had that. There was always somebody senior that, I could easily feed off of, right? But now we have like this trajectory of people gravitating individually alone with little to no resources of understanding how to navigate and just jumping into senior level positions. So that's one side of it. The other side of collaboration, I think that is also important to look into, is the side of, like you mentioned, like impact, right? We don't necessarily have a defined understanding of impact, from a design perspective here, as opposed to like the Western culture, So a good example is when you design products, right? There are accessibility guidelines that has to be in place. We see when we watch Apple launch videos, we see them talk about, what they're doing for sustainability, what they're doing for helping people with disabilities and all that, right? We don't have like impact-driven designs a lot here. A good example is I remember somebody put out a post on Instagram on how the African infrastructure is not designed for people with disabilities. A lot of establishments are not designed for people with disabilities, right? They are not factored into the process as much as it should be. Even hospitals, right, are not designed exactly. So it stems the question of if designers are actually thinking about impact, right? And this goes into a live experience that I had. And it was so sad that honestly I had no answer for this person. I didn't have a defined answer for this person because this person was dealing with African products. So I was given like a small group session, and I was called to give a talk, right? And the guy asked me a question that for someone who is visually impaired, right? How can I, use AI products, or how can I leverage AI tools, right? And he actually showed me his process, right? So for him to read a text message, he has to first take it. This is after increasing his font size. He has to take a screenshot and then start to zoom in on the message to be able to read. This is like a first-hand experience. And I was so marveled that this person has to go through this every single day just to, read a text. So imagine multiple conversations that this person has to be in, right? Or interacting with apps where he has to take a screenshot and then zoom in for him to actually like see or be able to like read clearly, right? And then he asked me a question. So then I'm like, okay, do you know like there are actually accessibility settings on your iPhone, right? That can actually aid you, right? There's voice to text that you can use for things like ChatGPT, where you can actually, so I had to like start walking through. But I realized that if this guy is interacting with only local products, right? Or local applications, or imagine if we had, we didn't have the privilege to use iPhones, right? What exactly will be this person's solution? How does this person now interact with other things that are not necessarily digital? So when we define what impact is, right, it's easier for designers or creative people to now start to pick those level of impacts and choose where they want to cause a change, right? A good example is sustainability goals, right? Like what are we thinking about in terms of like sustainable design? Or, for in the product aspect, what you would think about is how do you design for scalability? Your design systems that you're building, right? How is that able to scale and evolve? Because there must always be the room for evolution, and not just scalability alone, right? So defining impact has to be, and it's not a one-day conversation, it's a collective decision that has to be made over time, right? and has to work in tandem with other things happening, right? Design cannot be isolated from the change or effect that we need to cause in Africa. Like how David mentioned that, as Nigerians, we're not minimalists, right? And the more minimalism is forced on the average Nigerian, right, it's more or less is communicated as being silenced, right, as opposed to being free to express yourself, or to express, your creative expression, right? So personal projects is one way to drive impact. And I think that the easiest way to work on a personal project, right, is to have an impact-driven mindset, which is why we can actually spend each day working on the Huddle. We can put our resources into working on the Huddle, right? We can collaborate and think about different initiatives that we can do through the Huddle, because overall, there's our impact that we want to drive, which is global accessibility and visibility for creatives in Africa, right? And we have a backing to that towards like us trying to like really build that case, right? Where, there's now a system in place of being able to understand what the structure of the right African creative talent looks like. What should we be looking for in hiring someone in Africa, right? If you look at the jobs where you see, remote jobs, and they say they want to hire, people in EMEA, you mostly find out that the A part is never really considered. Like you see like, oh, we're okay with that, but then you now see brackets, these are the countries we're looking for, right? And you would most likely not find Nigeria, you will not find Ghana, and that's really difficult. The other part of it is I would say on the commercial side, because we must also always add survival to it, right? Because this is also a profession, right? Till companies locally evolve to creating a structure of growth for creatives, right? Our companies will never hire the best talents. There's this conversation around, it's very difficult for, companies to get great talent in Africa. And I believe that that's not true, because how come international companies are then finding awesome talents that they're willing to go through any extent to bring them, to their country, right, to work on their products, right? So you find out like businesses here need to really understand, right, what is the impact of design in their overall business objective, right? Our banks need to really think about what role does design play, right? Creative agencies need to think about what impact does design drive. It cannot just be, commercial alone. And then when you bring these people, you then need to build systems for growth, right? Very few, companies have systems for growth, systems for design being able to play a seat at the table, and also understanding how design can play a huge role, or creativity can actually play a huge role in overall like profits, like the big number. Because at the end of the day, like to really get these people's attention, you need to speak data, you need to speak numbers, right? And till we can define what numbers are being added based off of design, you cannot separate Paystack from its design and its design team. No matter how much you think about it from an engineering, a finance standpoint, you cannot separate it from its design team. It's exceptional because of also the role that the design team played in building such a product, right? And funny how if you use products like OPay too, you can actually not separate OPay from its design, right? OPay, embodies the African app approach, but at the same time, it's actually working for everyone. There's this funny joke where when you see somebody with their phone and they have to open their mouth in public, the person is probably using OPay because of this, their security verification stuff, right? But to just sum it up, right? Yes, they have this verification stuff where you have to blink or open your mouth, right? Before you can send out a large transaction. As weird as it sounds, right? They had this problem where people were complaining that their money was being moved, transactions were being initiated from their OPay account, right? And as crazy as it is, that's what we talk about where we say designing for African problems and providing solutions that actually work here, right? So they had to now lean into a different extent of identity verification and just face ID. So when you turn your head sideways to send a transfer, right, you must be really intentional about trying to move that amount of money, right, before you then make a complaint to say, hey, this transfer was done for your account. So trust me, we have so many different paradigms here, that I think that if we really understand the role of collaboration, we understand the impact of design and clearly define that, right? It's something that shouldn't be different across board. It can have different expressions, but we should have one unique or one identified purpose of design, or creativity here, and be able to define what its impact is. And that's what we can then now use to start to onboard founders, start to onboard decision makers. That's the blueprint that any creative can take, right? To say, hey, this is why we think this way. This is why, we should take this approach in marketing your product. This is why the references you are sending are great, but this is why we should reference this particular, creatives. And like David mentioned, right, like till we get to the point where we're comfortable referencing what is done locally, right, we won't be able to achieve that level of uniqueness and impact that we want to drive, right? Because we don't have defined styles, we don't have defined systems, we don't have defined approaches, which if you look at the backdated approach, right? If you look at the early designers from like the Shomolu side of things, right? Weirdly, they have systems because they went through an apprenticeship approach. So whatever you see that is being produced there, if you've noticed, right, irrespective of the growth of design, they've produced the same level of consistency overboard, right? Like it's the same thing they are churning out. They are comfortable with it, And to be honest, they've created systems now. If you want to do a funeral as well. Exactly. Like if you want to do a funeral poster, there's actually systems around it in Africa today based on what has been created in Shomolu. No, that's the honest truth.
If you go to Shomolu, you have a template of what you expect.
Exactly.
Maybe like a few variations, but yeah. That's so true. Like you're so on point. And I think one of the things that I like about the Huddle is also the system that David is churning out with the posters that you guys are doing. I think it's always something that I look forward to, like seeing the expression using different mediums and different expressions of the things that we know, everyday things. You use paper, you use like a wall. I think it's just intentional. It's like, I feel for me, it's like the height of intentionality. Of course, it's like a project. I wish I had that kind of time and resource to do that kind of thing, and of course skill, obviously, because this is not beads. I can't even imagine how much time and work it takes to do this kind of thing. So David, maybe you can speak maybe just briefly on what it takes to create, to be so intentional with like the poster design that you're doing now, that you guys do. Because I see how much, as a designer, I can see how much work it takes to do these simple looking things. So I think you did a bit of a talk about some of the posters, but just in a few words, what drives you to actually make the posters look this intentional for every guest, and how much work does it really take?
Okay, so it's a combination of, first of all, you need to know that it's hard work. It's not easy. And be ready to do the hard work. It's labor. Sometimes it feels like needless labor, because spending hours to do something that you could have found like an easy alternative to just figuring it out. So first of all, it's hard work. That's why I always like to let people know, because it will push you. especially when you have the outcome in mind. So it's like you're finding every way to actualize that outcome that you have in your mind, compared to you just walking in and then figuring it out as you go. So it's like, oh, you have an idea of what you want to bring out. So I want a very stylized wood texture on this board that looks like this. How can I get it? That's where the work starts. Then you try different things. You try different approach. Don't worry, some of these posters have pushed me to use some tools on Photoshop that I never knew existed. It's just testing stuff to see what actually works. And yeah, it's hard work. Just be ready to do the hard work. Sometimes it does not pay. Sometimes I think that's something I wanted to add earlier. It's like people already assume that if you do 2 + 2, it's always equal to 4. Sometimes it actually doesn't pay. So you then have to find what success means for you. For me, it's more fulfillment. So even if I'm doing passion project, because passion projects are good, they can give you like some of the kind of work that you want to do, but there's also the part where you might not actually get the work, and all you get from that passion project is fulfillment. And if that's enough for you, then go for it. Because just to track back a little bit, we've spoken about designing something that feels more like you. We spoke about collaboration, but we need to first understand the Maslow hierarchy of needs, where what we're talking about is self-actualization. That's like where Nigerians struggle with is at the lowest. You want to eat. So you cannot tell someone that wants to eat to go and be discovering themselves or discovering like the type of work they want to create. No. So yeah, we need to understand that they need to first get money, then do passion project so think of the passion project. I like to think of the passion project more like building capacity for the kind of work I would like to do in future. If that passion project pays, great. I mean, I've had situations where it did not pay, and I've had situations where it paid very well, like something that I did not plan for. So it paid very well. So if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, I'm building capacity for the kind of work I would like to do in the future. And yeah, that's pretty much how I look at that part. Sorry to like change the direction of the conversation, but like back to the poster, it's hard work. You just need to know that you have to put in the work. There's no shortcuts. I promise you, there's no shortcut. There are some times where, I remember doing the story poster when I was trying to do that vinyl, and I had to go and print like a sample vinyl on to paste it to see how it feels, then try and scratch it a bit, then try to do it again on Photoshop, then the file crashed, then I had to start afresh from that type of situation. Is hard work, because when you think about it, like it has crashed, like I could have really just had to do it in the end, so that is what I want to do. So you just need to be determined as much. Like you need to be determined, because once you're determined, there's one thing I always say: you can do everything, you can do anything. Like there's nothing that's too big or too difficult for you to learn once you're determined. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. I guess some of us need to work harder. We will try our best. We are doing our best, David. We're doing our best. Okay, we're wrapping up. We're coming to the end. I think it has been actually fun. I think we've discussed some of the things I really, really wanted us to touch on. I'm glad at the depth of insight you guys have on different topics. Obviously, David packed with your own creative direction and angle, and Samuel, well, like you went deep, you went all the way. Thank you so much for sharing on those things. I think I'll just maybe as we wrap up, just ask a few random questions just to lighten up the space a bit. We've been talking a bit about the hard things, so let's go a bit soft. So I'll ask you two different questions. So I'll ask David one. Let me go with David first. So David, what's one creative habit that you swear by?
Archiving and documenting.
That's a habit for you.
Yeah, I like to always collect things. You
have something, right? You have a project that you're collecting things, I believe. Yeah. Nice. And how's that going?
Great. It's going great. A lot of work. I think is one of the hardest work I've ever had to do.
Wow. Amazing. Samuel, like what's one misconception about the African creatives that should die?
So I think like the major misconception is that like brings the most results. And what I mean by that is not necessarily complexity, that it's till I get to work on the largest project, right? Before, I can get the attention, I can get to certain opportunities, right? So I think like that's like one big misconception. I think like people should be comfortable in just naturally like working on like give every project your all, as though that project was like the best project you would ever work on, irrespective of how much of a scale or how large the project is, right? And I think like it's always this like what you mentioned with Shay, right? For me, like the projects that have gotten me like jobs or referrals, have not been the most crazy projects, right? There were things that projects I even did that, even in terms of like the pay, was not even up to the to like what the standard would have been, right? And those are projects that I'm on conversation like, oh, I want to know more about this particular project. I'm like, this project of all projects, I've prepared like a more enhanced case study. Like, no, like I think like this project is really good. And it's always weird for me because I'm like, you never know what people, what drives or what can spark curiosity, right? And that's why like you must make sure that you invest in each project, right, from a perspective of this is a reflection of my capability and what I can do, right? It shouldn't be based on like the scale or size, or how much in terms of like financial benefit the project is. Obviously you should know how to like handle that, but you shouldn't water down quality, right, due to like the size or like the quantity of the project. So I think like that's like the biggest misconception, that it's until I get to work in at one of like the largest companies, right, before I can do like my most impactful work.
There's a last question we ask all our guests on the session, and it's a reflective question. It's just to get a sense of your direction and where you're going. And the question is basically, what are you currently doing to be a better version of yourself? And it doesn't have to be one-sided. It can be like as simple as anything, or as big as something. Like you could be saying, oh, you want to do PhD, for example, or you could say you want to be drinking more water. That's just how wide, how varying it could be. So for you, what's that?
Okay, so for me, what I'm most particular about right now is building sustainable relationships, right? Like clearly defining what relationships I'm looking to have, right? And working towards cultivating those relationships. And that has just, come from like the current notion or perspective that I have, that is, you can, and I think it's a general perspective where you can actually go far as an individual, right? But you can go further, when you have more hands involved, right? You can accomplish more, and you can do more, right, when you have more people involved. So building like relationships for me is something that I'm planning to do to like better improve myself. And the relationships that are clearly defined in terms of what are higher up relationships in terms of mentorships, right? More people that I really want to learn closely from them, people that I feel like they have desirable traits that I want to be able to, gain. And these relationships is not just relationship from a human perspective, like it's also relationship with books, right? Like I want to be able to like read more, and my focus on like reading more is more books to help me understand, how geniuses think. Like, oh, how did Steve Jobs think? Like more books on like people that I look up to, or people that I just really love what they were able to achieve, and looking for like materials that either they wrote or documentaries that were made about them, and just like really like understanding who they were, understanding like what were their own constraints. So being able to learn from like or build relationships with existing people around me, people outside of my comfort zone. A good example is the Huddle right now. We have to step into more relationship building to get us to scale, right? We need to be able to, we want to take the Huddle to other African countries. We have done Lagos, Nigeria. We've done, Accra, Ghana, right? We plan to take it to Rwanda, we plan to take it to Kenya, South Africa, other African countries, right? And there's a lot of like relationship building that is going to go into that, because at the end of the day, we're going into different, locations that have their own cultural perspective. They have their own sense of community. And the only way to get access into that is to build the right relationships with, people across board, start to understand how they think, and also be able to really build or approach tailored to where they're at, right? Understanding where they're at, and stuff like that. So for me, like, it's just more about like relationship building, and also just more on like the reading aspect, right? I plan to like read more, very, very tailored with what I'm interested in reading, right? I'm a big fan of, like, I always believe that you can find processes in different, mediums, like I've mentioned, right? Like, you shouldn't just, you should read, as a designer, read about like who are like the top designers, understand how they think. Now we have like a good example is like the Hungry Creative podcast that you run, right? Like, it's such a good way to really get an unfiltered, understanding of the speakers that you bring. Like, for example, your session with like Shay, like, you guys talked about like way back, Unilag, you talk, and it was, for me, it was like, oh, like, okay, so that's why this happened. Oh, now I understand what really brought about like the birth of like that design studio. It was something I started to see, like, oh, this particular phase that I'm in, right? There are learnings that I can take from here, right, to actually help me in this phase. So for me, it's to consume as much, like documentation of these different patterns, right? And the goal for that is to be able to bring that into, expressions that we're working on, things like the Huddle, other things that we plan to do. So that's like majorly on it for me.
I mean, I think it's just an example of how creatives are like, there's no limits, right? There's no guarding, like, oh, it's my work, or it's my thing, like, it's my space. Like, at the end of the day, like, I mean, it's all contributing towards the end goal. Like, nobody's doing this for profit. I'm not doing it for profit. I'm sure you guys are not also doing it for profit. You're doing it because it feels a part of you that, something else might not feel. For me, it's fulfillment, man. Every time I have these conversations, it's like conversations like with you guys resonate with me, and I'm like, okay, I'm on the right path. I think I'm on the right path. It just gives me that validation to know to keep going. So I'm really happy that we had this session. Thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait to see what, the Huddle becomes. I think it's such a fantastic platform. I love so many things I love about what you guys are doing. I think I haven't spoken about that, but one of the things I love is also how wide or the kind of guests that you bring. Like, they are spread across different sectors. I saw someone that does like writing, and then I saw someone that does fashion, like handcraft, like weaving or something like that. And I'm just like, yeah, that is creativity. Like, but I feel like I'm going on a different rant. I don't want to go too far. But let me just touch on it. I think one of the things that I've learned in my short journey so far is that it's very easy for us to get locked into design conversation. One thing that you said, or one person said, Samuel, I think you said it, is
also getting to experience other crafts, other creatives, other people, not even creatives, other professionals, just getting a sense of how they think and how they get work done. By just having a conversation, I have the most random conversations, guys. Like, I can literally walk up to a doctor and have a full-blown conversation with them because I'm just curious. Like, I'm just curious. Like, what are you doing? Like, why is your syringe? Why are you pressing it like this? Like, just that curiosity of a child. Literally, that's how I am. Like, I can have a conversation with anybody. And that's just what, when I have that conversation, I'm just like, I've learned something else. Okay, good. I've noted it. I don't know where I'll use it, how I'll use it. I just have it. And it just gives me like that high. That's the high. For me, that's my high. And I love the fact that you guys do that with the Huddle because, hearing how someone who is using a different medium to create their work also gives you a different context. And I think that's one of the things I love about studying architecture because you're designing for all kinds of people and all kinds of clients. Like you can design a primary school today, tomorrow you can be designing a commercial, high, skyscraper or something. But just having a sense of how people think can help you to design better for everybody. So I love that about what you guys are doing. I mean, I think we've done very well with this session. So thank you guys for your time.